Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate coming your way, continuing my reviews of the Amityville movies. I'm coming at you today to review Amityville 1992. It's About Time, from the director of Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. So this movie came out on video courtesy of Republic Pictures home video, obviously in 1992. This is something I was interested in seeing at the time because I was, this is just like a year after I got into Amityville. Even though by this time, I'm fully aware that these movies pretty much suck because they're not with the original classic house. Of course, they still, look at that, how cheap that is. They still put the classic house on the cover with the victim in the window there. So I kind of like the cover art, but obviously it's a cheat, it's a cheap kind of gimmick. It should be said that before I start the review, it's kind of an interesting thing to note that when when Lionsgate put the DVD out of this movie, they took the 1992 out of the title, so it's just Amityville, It's About Time. And having rewatched this recently to do the review, they even took they blotted out with the black square, they blotted out the 1992 from the title sequence, so it's just like Amityville, It's About Time, and there's this black square where 1992 is supposed to be on the opening title sequence and during the actual movie on the DVD. So I'm not sure why they felt the need to take away the 1992. Maybe they just felt like people wouldn't be interested in a super old movie from 1992 or something like that. So maybe that was Lionsgate's attempt on DVD to try to make it, to take the dating off of the movie and make it a little more marketable. But I actually don't terribly, this movie's kind of cool, and being from like the director of Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, for me it's got, it's got some things going for it. It's not a huge deal. The opening credits, the music is really cool. I actually like the theme of this, the music in the movie and the theme they got in the opening credits. And since it's about a clock, it's like there'll be a credit and this big pendulum thing will swing back and forth in the opening credits. And it's really kind of a, for a straight-to-video, lower-budget horror movie, it's really kind of a cool opening credit sequence. A lot of times we just get the old, freaking white-on-black credits, and we don't get much more than that. But I thought the pendulum, swinging by slowly every now and then during the opening credits with the, ominous whoosh thing was a kind of a cool gimmick. And like I say, the music is really good in this movie, and in particular the opening credit music, or I should say maybe the main theme of the movie. So basically the premise of this movie, much like with Amityville 4, The Evil Escapes, you have what I call the demon lamp, where, all the Amityville evil goes into a lamp and is transported across the country to a different house to infest with the evil. This takes kind of the same premise, where the movie begins with this character who's a architect. He's returning home in, presumably California, having been in Amityville, and presumably this clock, which I'll call the demon clock in this movie, is full of Amityville evil or whatever. Presumably this clock was from the classic Amityville house. I guess what he says, or in the plot premise of this movie, the classic Amityville house for this movie's purposes, and probably maybe other houses around it or whatever, have all been demolished to get away from a new housing development that this guy is probably a part of, and designing or creating or whatever. So this guy comes home to basically his house that's, he's got like a teenage daughter who was actually played by a young Megan Ward, and then he's got a teenage son who's, I don't know, this kid looks familiar, probably because I've just seen him in Amityville in 1992, but maybe he's gone on to do other things, maybe not. But he's got two teenage kids who've been under the care of his former girlfriend, who is in like a graduate school or grad school or whatever the hell she's doing. So I think she's not too terribly much, maybe she's like 10 years older than these, the teens she's babysitting or whatever. But the guy who, what the hell's the guy's name? Jacob, I think Jake, the main star of the guy, and the main star of the movie is named Jake, and he and this grad student had a former relationship or whatever, and the premise of this movie goes that it's kind of unrealistic, but that this woman would come back to, she used to live with him in this house, and it's kind of unrealistic that, I guess everything pretty much happens out there in the world, so whatever, but that she'd come back and, babysit the teenagers for a few days or whatever while he's gone. So he comes back bringing this clock that he just, from the Amityville house, presumably, that he thought would just spruce up this one room so much, and he puts it on the mantle, and it's just like, ooh, ah, oh, fantastic. I can't remember what the reactions were, but what ends up happening, I think that night, is, like a little kind of, I think it's out of the back of the clock comes a little robo-claw, comes out, go, and then just like, just affixes to the wall, and then a drill comes out, and it's like, nee. So basically that night this demon clock from the Amityville house drills its way into the house, and presumably, that way we can infest the house very much with like the demon lamp from part 4. Can infest the house with the demon Amityville evil crap. Yay! So, his former girlfriend, or his former, living girlfriend, played by, this woman is also, the only other thing I know her from is one of the first full moon movies by the name of Shadow Zone, and she's got like a guy's name, Sean Weatherly, and this woman is, kind of, I don't know, she she does a topless scene that night. This guy, when he returns, this guy tricks her, seduces her into getting down and dirty that night. And at first I was like, is that a double? But no, you see her from the side, and I think she's got, I think you actually see her kind of topless from the side or whatever, and they have a sex scene, and then she's basically, her plans is to just, this little sex thing meant nothing, and she's just going to leave the next day or whatever. Well, what ends up happening early the next morning is this guy goes for a jog, and then he encounters this, I guess there's this neighborhood dog that just comes around and whatever by the name of Peaches. It's just like this older woman, basically the dog of this older woman in the neighborhood or whatever, and this guy goes for a jog, and is basically what happens in this movie is, since the possessed item is a clock, a demon clock in this movie, basically it's kind of a cool gimmick. And as a matter of fact, I mean, if they just called this movie Time Killer or some kind of non-Amityville related title or something, it would have been a kind of a cool movie, because what happens with the demon clock is it can slow down time, basically to stop time and make horrible events happen within basically a millisecond that these, certain characters are experiencing, but no one else is experiencing because it's happening within a blink of an eye or whatever. So, but the first event scene being kind of like horrific / action scene in this movie makes the least sense, because it actually doesn't take place in the house, which is really kind of stupid. I mean, usually in an Amityville movie up until this point, I think pretty much with the exception of like the evil causing the car to swerve out of control in the first movie, that kind of crap, usually stuff doesn't take place outside of the house. So what's really kind of dumb and fakey about the first kind of, I don't know, horrific / event scene in this movie is, this guy is basically jogging to this fence where he's going to presumably turn around and, go back, and when he gets to the fence all out of breath and stuff, his clock, his fancy digital clock on his wrist is like making sounds and like like it's just slowing down and stopping or whatever. And then he turns around to see this woman and her dog Peaches, and the dog's all hot to trot to basically attack him. So what ends up happening is this dog attacks him in this scene, and he slashes its face with a broken bottle, and barely makes it out of it alive, and his legs all effed up from the get-go. So basically this woman who was gonna, Sean Weatherly character, who was going to leave that morning, is now kind of forced to stay on a couple more days. Not that she really has to, because you'd think her kids, his kids could, look after him, but she's forced to stay on, which is kind of unrealistic, continually unrealistic with that relationship, and to look after this guy for, I can never remember his name, Jacob. So basically, she's gonna kind of have to look after him for a few days, and it's kind of a bummer for her because she was looking to continue on and get the hell out of Dodge and continue on with her life or whatever. So the guy who plays the main guy in this movie, Jake, I always thought was fantastic. I want to say he's in the movie from a few years prior, The Graveyard Shift, as a kind of a Stephen King adaptation horror movie or whatever that was actually in the theater, I think. So I mean, this guy, I think he's in that movie, but this guy who plays Jake in this movie does this, is really kind of what holds the movie together and does a great job, because basically after he gets bitten by the dog and he's invalid in bed and stuff, I mean his condition, mental condition, just deteriorates, and he kind of becomes kind of a Jack Torrance from The Shining, if you will. Kind of a character where I guess he's maybe slowly becoming possessed or whatever. But it should be said that this guy, I think, is actually really good. Well, I mean, all the people really do a pretty good job in this movie. It should also be said that the woman from Puppet Master 2, who plays like the exact same part in this movie, she was like a clairvoyant or some kind of crap in Puppet Master 2. It's like you just took the character from Puppet Master 2 and just put her in this movie like a year later. She's also in this movie, like I say, basically playing the same part as kind of this, I don't know what, if she's just mystic kind of woman who just knows all this kind of stuff or whatever. The teen son of Jacob is all into this and that, being a metalhead or whatever, and he kind of gets there's trippy stuff that goes on in the house with the clock, and he kind of gets a whiff of what's going on, and he actually goes down at night to look into the room, and he switches a light switch, and it goes from the living room to just a dungeon, a torture room or whatever, when he flips the light switch, and he keeps flipping it off and on, and it goes from the dungeon torture room back to their room and torture room, and the only consistent thing in both of those scenes is like the clocks on the mantle. So it's like, oh gosh, so it's possible that, I think this movie's trying to say that this clock was evil even before the Amityville house. Like maybe this clock was sitting on the mantle in some dungeon in some medieval freaking castle, torture chamber or something like that. I think this movie's kind of trying to say that. One of the things that clues this teen boy into weird goings on in this movie, and what I think is a really cool scene, is when they're at breakfast with him and this grad student, former girlfriend of the main character, having breakfast, and she's like, "Where's the phone book?" And he's like, "Oh, I'll go to get it." So while he's like going to get the phone book, he's telling her some story, and when he comes back, and they do this all in one shot, which means they had to rig a way to make it, to switch it. I don't think there's a cut. And when he gets back, it's basically night. It might be like 12 or 9 hours later. So basically, because the room he went into was the room with the demon clock to get the phone book. So when so it kind of slows him down. So when he gets back to the kitchen with the phone book, it's like 9 hours later, and she's like, happens to be in the kitchen at the same time, and she's like, "Where did you go? You disappeared at breakfast." And to him, it was just walking into the other room and coming back, and that's it. It was really, really a cool bit. So that's kind of one of the things that really clued this teen boy into what the hell's going on. Something's weird's going on here. And then sometime later on in the movie, while the main character of Jake is laid up in bed, just suffering and writhing and just potentially being possessed by Amityville evil or whatever, what I think is continually, this movie just gets more and more unrealistic as it goes on. And then this woman's former girlfriend of Jake's, current psychiatrist boyfriend arrives, and it's almost like they're having a date, in Jake's house with, I don't know why, it's just so weird. So this woman's current boyfriend comes and has a date with her in the house of her former boyfriend's place, who's currently invalid in bed and stuff, and she's supposed to be taking care of him. That's really kind of weird. And I think the guy stays over, I think, and I think they have sex in his house, in the ex-boyfriend's house, when he's laid up in bed with a dog bite injury stuff. That's really funny. But what I wanted to introduce with this character of Lenny is the current boyfriend of this the Sean Weatherly character, and there's this interesting scene that takes place in the middle of the night or whatever, when this Lenny character comes into the kitchen and gets like a midnight snack or something, and he turns on the microwave and sits down, and it's like, beep, 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 beep. the timer of the whatchamacallit microwave slows down and actually just completely stops, and all of a sudden out of nowhere this guy Jake appears, and really this is like one of the best scenes of the movie. Just this is some, he uses some wide angle lenses in this scene, and that really makes it kind of cool. And I just think the writing and the acting in this scene is done really well, where basically it's just some haunting scene, but basically Lenny at the time doesn't know what the hell is going on, and he basically, Jake appears and questions him about whatever, just talks about this and that. I want to say, don't let me forget to mention this. The guy who plays Lenny is absolutely fantastic as just this pretentious know-it-all frickin' psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever the hell guy this is. And the scene between both of them in this scene is really kind of cool, and it ends where this a gun comes into play, and he's like pointing it at the guy, and he's like, no, 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 and it's like bang, and after the bang it's like all of a sudden it's just beep beep, the microwave's beeping down. So all this stuff happened within a millisecond or whatever, and this makes Lenny, I can't remember what his reaction was to it, like if it was just something he ate, or I can't remember how he rationalizes what he experiences, but that was a really kind of a fun scene. So, the character that Megan Ward plays, a teen daughter or whatever of this main guy, Jake, it's kind of this, good girl in this movie, and she's got the crush on this, jock guy, and what ends up happening, of course, with this movie is there's, she wants to be nice and have the Sean Weatherling characters sleep in her bed once. That's kind of an excuse to have Megan Ward sleep on the couch in the same room with the demon clock. So what ends up happening that night is it kind of turns her into, from good girl into bad girl, if you will. And there's this little thing that happens in the mirror where she's looking at herself just like a couple of years earlier, and crash and burn, and she also would look at herself. And it's kind of funny, Megan Ward always ends up in these scenes where she's looking at herself, admiring herself in the mirror. But what ends up happening in this scene is like her reflection will end up becoming naughty and like licking her lips and all this kind of stuff. So what ends up happening is, she kind of turns into, whatever. It goes from good girl to bad girl in that scene, and then the next morning she's all. It's funny where she'd get all these clothes that she's wearing the next morning. She probably, being a good girl, being a good girl, she probably wouldn't own this, really short skirt and all these clothes or whatever, but she ends up, dressed all super sexy to go to school the next morning. And I think it's funny because the brother's reaction is almost like, ooh, almost like he's aroused or something, which is kind of gross. But so, bad girl, former good girl turned bad girl, Megan Ward goes to school, and basically, oh yeah. So that's a point that ends up, I don't know if that ends up happening, I guess, it doesn't matter when it ends up happening, but a scene where she'll bring that, the jock boy home and, lures him into the basement and, with the tease and leaving a trail of clothes and stuff, and lures him into the basement to, I don't know, lure him into some kind of just goop or whatever that sucks him down and just materializes him in nothing. And there's this screaming Mad George-ish kind of image of his face just in this, just puddle of goo or whatever crap that's just, absorbing him into the floor. So she kind of just being, bad girl kind of lures this jock guy to his demise. Ooh. So towards the end of the movie, this Jake character spends the rest of the whole movie after his leg is bit just being kind of a crotchety, frickin' possessed, irritable, just whatever, demon-minded guy. So what ends up being revealed towards the end of the movie is something that's really kind of cool. He has this, earlier shown in the movie, he's a, architect and a developer or whatever, so he has this kind of little bit of, little mock-up model of land and all these houses and stuff like that on it. So what ends up happening, but towards the end of the movie, when the Sean Weatherly character will go down into his room, you see all these little Amityville models, houses on this, this little miniature land area, and it's really kind of a cool idea. I mean, I think the windows are lit up in them and stuff, and camera moves over until we see this kind of more, I think like a larger one and a little more detailed. Unfortunately, we don't see it cuts away, and I don't think we cut back to it. It's really kind of cool, little Amityville models and stuff. So they do kind of try to work, Amityville into the movie as good as they can. You give them props for that. But those models were really cool. It'd be interesting to know what ended up happening with that stuff. So when all hell breaks loose towards the end of the movie and stuff, I can't even really remember. I mean, I just watched it a few days ago or something, but I can't even really remember. I mean, it's not earth-shattering or groundbreaking what happens towards the end of the movie. I mean, I think this, basically she's probably just locked in the house and can't get out, and I think Jake's attacking her. I can't remember where the kids are at this point, bad girl Megan Ward and the teen son or whatever. But he's just, Jake is, all possessed and presumably going to kill her or whatever. And for some reason, I don't know why, but we end up, breaking away. It's kind of a cool little gimmick, when they're in that room with the clock. I can't remember if he took a swing at her with this weapon thing and he hits the wall. I can't remember why there's, they start peeling away the wall, but what's revealed when they peel away the wall right by the clock is that gears have actually kind of become into the wall and stuff. So when you peel away the wall, you can see like clock gears have like infested, presumably the whole house, or at least right there by where the clock is. So it's kind of cool to see like a visual representation of the clock taking over the house. That's kind of a cool gimmick, I guess. Oh yeah, the teen son is a part of the end scene, because there's a scene where he basically tries to run to the aid of Sean Weatherly character, and the clock goes back when he's running, and he's like, ah, and basically turns him into a baby or whatever the hell, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, and wearing his clothes. And this kid that they show in his clothes, dragging his clothes on the floor, actually has a mullet, which is kind of funny. What's strange is I don't know if the kid has a mullet or not, but anyway, that was kind of funny. So that's kind of a gimmick what they do also with the clock being a demon clock, is being able to turn back time and turn characters into babies, and then moments later it'll go forward and turn the Sean Weatherly character into an old, like 90-year-old woman and all this crap. So this is the kind of stuff that's happening during the end, climactic, if you will, closing scene. Just making characters babies and old women and stuff. Kind of funny. So I can't even remember what the hell happens after the woman turns old. I can't remember what happens, but what ends up happening at the very end of the movie, which I give this movie props for, is I don't know, I can't remember what happens and what the reason for the time going back to the beginning, but what ends up happening at the end of the movie is it's basically, I should have mentioned, I forgot to mention, but I'll mention it now. At the beginning of the movie, when Jake comes home, she's clutching this piece of, it's for architecture or drafting or whatever, this ruler kind of thing and the guy's like, why do you have that? And she's like, for protection. So at the end of the movie, she uses that for protection against Jake. So basically, I can't remember why at the end of the movie it turns, maybe the clock just goes back in time and it basically resets to that moment when Jake is coming home at the beginning of the movie, and we see her on the floor clutching that ruler thing that's kind of got this pendulum thing on the end, so you can swing at it and maybe hurt people and stuff. So she answers the door with this thing, and now we know why she had it at the beginning of the movie, because it's this endless cycle or whatever. So that was really kind of cool. So basically the end of this movie ends up, basically ending the way it began. And the only thing is when the character, and who knows how many times it went through this cycle, the only thing is once the clock is unveiled this time at the end of the movie, she sees it and is just like, and just instantly goes all nuts and crazy and presumes to use that measuring device or whatever ruler thing to hack the clock to pieces and just smash it and just bash it all to hell, and just in a kind of a kind of a anxious fit, if you will, and then just drops the ruler thing and just kind of walks out the door, and that's the end of the movie. And I thought that was really, really, really kind of a cool way to end this movie, particularly about a movie that's got a possessed clock. That's why I think it would have been better if you just called it Time Killer or something like that. And just, obviously using the title Amityville, you get some potential more of a marketable product than just calling a movie Time Killer or some generic haunted clock movie. But, it's very possible that this script was originally something like the clock from the torture chamber just now in a modern home or whatever, and you know, at some point someone bought the story and just interjected the Amityville shit into the story. I mean, that's very possible. But I think the movie, as a movie, if you just kind of don't look at it as an Amityville movie, is a kind of an interesting movie. I'm actually going to be able to go as high as 1 star out of 4 stars for Amityville 1992. I mean, it might even be worthy of 1 1/4 stars out of 4 stars. Tell you what, let's just go 1 1/4 stars out of 4 stars, because I think the scenario is competent enough, in being able to see, you know, young Megan Ward, in particular this guy who plays Jake, I think is really good, and Sean Weatherling's good, and the guy who plays Lenny's good. I mean, and then you get to see the woman from, you know, Puppet Master 2, and her death scene is really funny, involving like a, I don't know, ice cream delivery truck or something, and she's almost run down, and then, you know, she's knocked, and then this thing on top of the thing, like a woodpecker with this cone nose, is like teeter-tottering and falls and stabs her, and it's like kind of funny. So I mean, the movie's one of the more entertaining Amityville sequels after the third movie. Probably my favorite of, you know, I've only seen up until New Generation. So in between, you know, if you're going like, what's my favorite Amityville sequel from between like 4 and New Generation, this is it. I think this is the most competent one. And as I said, it was probably just another script, just a generic time, you know, possessed clock movie that they just rewrote some parts into and make it an Amityville movie. But that's my review of Amityville 1992. It's about time. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, we'll catch you next time.